Can religiosity affect a society's appetite for violence? Religiosity is defined as the intensity of religious feeling or belief. Many commentators have developed their own theories on this question, with some claiming religiosity leads to more violence. Yet others suggest the opposite. Religiosity may lead to less violence. So, it is up to empirical research to understand which is the case. Unfortunately, this is difficult because other contemporaneous developments are hard to filter out. We don't know whether violence erupts because of religiosity. In fact, it's even very difficult to systematically measure religiosity in a society in a consistent manner over time. Our first contribution is to introduce two society-wide measures of religiosity over time. First, we measure how often religious language appears in books published every year in the 200 years before the Enlightenment. We do this for British English, Spanish, French, German, and Italian. The result is a rough thermometer of religiosity in these societies over time. Second, we look at the names parents give their newborns. In a given society and year, what share of newborns receive a religious first name? This is our second proxy of religiosity that we can derive for 8 European states before the Enlightenment. We find both of these religiosity measures, the share of religious language in book publications and the share of religious first names of newborns, is weakly related to a society's likelihood to go to war against another state. When any of these religiosity proxies are higher, a society is just a little bit more likely to start a war. Our second contribution is to suggest a method through which we can understand whether religiosity causes wars, cutting through all the noise that happens otherwise. What we need is something that happens randomly, without being connected to any other man-made developments, but affects religiosity. If we find such a setting, we have a chance to see behind the curtain and understand whether religiosity really causes violence. Our proposed solution to this tall order is solar eclipses. Before the Enlightenment, people largely didn't understand how a solar eclipse happens. And the only explanation is that a solar eclipse is a supernatural event. It makes religiosity salient. Statistically, we can then check whether religiosity induced by a locally visible solar eclipse is followed by a higher or lower likelihood to start a war against another state. Indeed, our results show strong patterns. More religiosity means more attack wars. Even if we don't use our religiosity measures directly, we see substantially more attack wars just in the year after a locally visible solar eclipse. Why does this happen? One prominent explanation delineates religious in-groups from religious out-groups. If religiosity becomes more important, then the difference to someone who doesn't share my religion is highlighted. We test whether our data show patterns that are consistent with this in-group out-group explanation. Indeed, attack wars against societies of another religion are particularly likely when religiosity is high. Christian societies, for example, are much more likely to attack non-Christian societies when religiosity is high. Finally, we test this in-group out-group hypothesis on two different databases. Before the Enlightenment, two types of conflict against religious outgroups were widespread: violence against Jewish people and witch hunts. These conflicts happened at the city level, so we have much more data. Indeed, the results show that if a solar eclipse can be seen in a given city and year, both types of violence are much more likely to happen in that city. Remember, this is a time when people still believed solar eclipses were supernatural religious phenomena. The fact that we see so many similar patterns suggests religiosity in Europe before the Enlightenment indeed caused more violence. Of course, these results need to be interpreted carefully and in context. For example, we cannot just transfer these findings into more recent eras. For the full paper, please check either Michael's or Tim's website.